this video, we're going to be going over measuring gaps. Now, measuring gaps, it's a very, I won't say forbidden, but probably a not talked about concept. Because when you hear measuring gaps, it's like, what the hell is a measuring gap? Yeah, okay. So measuring gaps is basically, if you want to hear the verbal explanation of it, it's a gap that forms within the midpoint of a liquidity run, okay? And you use that gap as a standard deviation projection to see where price really wants to go. So for example, if we're bullish on the day here. I already did my analysis and everything. We're bullish on the day, clearly, because we already have this news driver. It's pumping price up after hitting this imbalance. So the day is bullish, obviously. Our point of liquidity, or our liquidity run, is right here. That's our point of liquidity that we're looking to be taken out. Right there, sell side liquidity. Okay. So knowing that, from swing to swing, right? From the liquidity point to the last swing that was created after the liquidity point, before it takes it out, and you see this is the lowest swing right there. That's the lowest swing after the sell side liquidity. That's the lowest swing. So from there to there, that's your dealing range, okay? Half of that, you want to see a fair value gap. Whatever fair value gap is closest to this midpoint of this dealing range, right here, you want to take it from the low, right? From the low, not the sell side liquidity point, but from the low, the lowest swing after the liquidity point, the lowest swing after the liquidity point, to the gap that's closest to equilibrium or right at equilibrium, whatever is closest to equilibrium, okay? As you see, we've already hit the first standard deviation. So if we delete this, right? If we delete that, we can say, if we can draw a line right here saying this is equilibrium, we can do that too. Right there, that line is equilibrium. I don't know what I can set it as, but I can probably do something just to, make this easy for your eye. Let's make it blue, why not? So that blue line is equilibrium, okay? Our liquidity run is right there. Our drawn liquidity is right there. So we're expecting that point to get taken out. That's your drawn liquidity, right? The lowest swing that was created before the liquidity run. So this swing here, from swing to swing, you want to draw that. You want to make a dealing range. Boom, bam. Okay. Right there's the equilibrium, okay? Knowing that, we want to find a fair value gap closest to the equilibrium to have a standard deviation projection. This is the closest. This is probably too big. Okay, because if we draw it out, a little too big, a little too far away from equilibrium. This one, it's closer. Okay. Knowing that, see, look at that. Boom, look at that. Could have just taken now. I could have took this trade, but I didn't do it because I wanted to teach you guys. But as you see here, you draw from the low to the highest, or the high of the measuring gap, all the way to the fill of the measuring gap, okay? Not down here, but all the way over the entire measuring gap, basically. So if it's a bullish measuring gap or a bullish fair value gap, and we're using it as a measuring gap, you take it all the way to the high of the gap. If it's a bearish fair value gap that we're using as a measuring gap, you take it all the way to the low of the bearish measuring gap. But in this example, it's bullish, so we're taking it to the lowest swing low before the liquidity point, or after the liquidity point, to the highest point of the measuring gap, which is right there. There's first standard deviation. Already took it. Here's second standard deviation. Why is second standard deviation good? See that high? So this could be another point of liquidity right there. I don't know why it's blue, but it doesn't matter. That's another point of liquidity right there. And it's going to push towards it too. It's going to do it. If you want to sit here and watch it do it while I explain, you can sit there and look at the candles. But anyways, back to explaining. That's your measuring gap right there. And it'll help you see where price is really going beyond that drawn liquidity. So if you want to make some extra profit or really see where price is going and hold your trade longer, then yeah, go ahead and look for a gap that forms close to the equilibrium of your liquidity run or your point of liquidity dealing range. And whichever gap is closest to that, you draw it from the lowest or highest swing to the highest point of the measuring gap. And there it is right there. Easy, simple, and done, right? Very easy. Now, I haven't really marked down any examples of this, but we're going to try to find some. Today, we will be finding some, I promise. But if we look here, ooh, look at that, another one. So we have this high here. That's buy side liquidity right here. Bam. I just realized that other example, I set it as sell side. Why did I do that? I set it as sell side. But looking back over here, it is coming to that second standard deviation. It is coming to that high. Going back over here, and don't mind my drawings, by the way. Don't worry about all these drawings. Worry about right here, this vicinity right here. I'll draw a little box just to help you. This vicinity right here, this is where we're focused on right there. So we have that point of liquidity. Boom. Bam. See that? The gap is right there at the equilibrium. See that gap right there? We use that as a measuring gap. So to the low, to the high of the measuring gap, we can then delete this. First standard deviation. It's good. Why? Because it's right above that high. That's where our original liquidity run is, or drawing liquidity, but look where this one standard deviation is. It's right there. So that's a good point to target. If you want to look, 2 standard deviations takes it. 3 standard deviations takes it. 4 standard deviations takes it. 5 standard deviations takes it. 6 standard deviations takes it. And even 6.5, it takes it. Why? Because if I go all the way back, there's a high that I marked somewhere around here. I forgot where I marked it, but it was like some sort of high all the way back here. But it came and took out all those points of standard deviation. So it's really going to tell you your price is headed. But if we want to look at all this high all the way over here, 4.5. Wow, that's amazing. That actually just surprised me. Do you see this high over here, this intermediate swing? Right there, that intermediate swing? Do you see that? Isn't that amazing? Truly amazing, isn't it? 4.5 is right at that high. Look at that. See that? See 4.5 standard deviation right there. So that's a good point to target. Now let's calculate the risk to reward on that. If we use that same measuring gap, and the measuring gap isn't just used for measuring standard deviation, you can use the measuring gap to take an entry. You can use, if it taps the measuring gap, you can use it as an entry. So we're going to do just that as soon as it comes into it. So about right there. Why not place 2 of them? Oh God, this is so unprofessional, guys. Go ahead and unsubscribe to me. I'm such a bad trader. That's hilarious. Anyway, set it at the bottom of the measuring gap, all the way to the 4.5 standard deviation. That would have provided you a 5 or close to 6 risk to reward. Is that good? Are you fine with that? Is that good? I think so. It's pretty good. Let's see if I can find one more example, guys, and then I'll be in this video in a second because measuring gaps are pretty easy to use. Alright, so if I can get an actual ting here, let's see. Alright, so we got these relative equal lows right here. Pay attention to that. Don't worry about the drawings. Those are just my drawings. We're focused on this box right here. This right here. This is where we're focused at. This is where we're doing all our annotations, okay? So we got this pool of liquidity down here. Ooh, why is it a liquidity pool? Because you see all the bodies colliding? See all the bodies? You want to do some analysis? Liquidity pool scan. See that? See that? That's the liquidity pool right there. And it also expands over there too because it's another low. So if we go back, there's your liquidity pool, okay? That's our point of liquidity. So we know that. We take it from the liquidity point to the last swing. That takes out liquidity right there. This is our dealing range. What fair value gap is closest to equilibrium? This one right here. So we take it to the swing high, to the measuring gap. Look at that. First standard deviation right below the liquidity pool. Let's take it out. Yep. Is there any other standard deviation? Yep. 2. Where's the 2 at? Right there at this fair value gap. Beautiful, isn't it? Very beautiful. This was a breakaway gap. This was a breakaway gap. But it is now a liquidity void. Why? Because you see this quick accumulation? Or this time distortion? Right here? Then it explodes up. So this is a breakaway gap and a liquidity void. Okay? So if you see those two both happen, yes, during that liquidity run, it's going to stay a breakaway gap. But it's still a liquidity void. So keep that in mind. It still has to come back and fill this. Did it do it? Yep. Where did it come to though? Where? Like where? But let's really think about where. It comes to the consequent encroachment. We're about to see. Come on, let's look. Bam! Isn't that crazy? Bam! Look at that. That's crazy. Do you see that? That's absolutely amazing. Bam! And then pops right back up. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. So that second standard deviation is right here at this breakaway gap / liquidity void. Okay, and it's going to stay a breakaway gap until this liquidity run here is done. This run of liquidity here. Once it's done, then it can come fill this liquidity void. Okay, it's going to stay a breakaway gap until the liquidity run is done. And the point of liquidity was right here. Okay? So once this was taken out, the price now has the eligibility to come and fill this liquidity void. Did it do it? Filled it right at equilibrium. Then bounce right back up. And remember, a liquidity void is a PD array, okay? It's a PD array. So you can use it as an entry or as a confluence. Simple. Very, very simple. Okay. It's not hard at all. Oh, I hope it's not hard. Hope it's not hard at least. But if we look at another one here, another example within one, see? I can delete the standard deviation. Here we go. Right here, see that? We got that high, and then we got these 2 points of liquidity showing a low resistance liquidity run. Do you see that? Right there? We draw it from the low to the high. Do you see that fair value gap right there? That's our measuring gap. So you go boom, all the way down, bam. Then what do we do? Standard deviation, bam. Look at that, 1 standard deviation, taken. 0.5 standard deviation, taken. Where's the 0.5? Right at that liquidity void. Does it take it? Yes, it does. Bam. Amazing, isn't it? It's crazy. Anyways, that was fun explaining this, because honestly, whenever I learn something, or whenever I hear some sort of term that I don't hear of ICTs, and you've probably heard me say this before. Whenever I hear something that I don't know of ICT, I'm like, wait a minute, I don't know that. I have to learn it. Okay. So if I upload a video and it's something new or something that you haven't heard of, I either just learned it that day or I've been studying it for at least 2 days, and I'm finally ready to reteach it to you guys. But anyways, that's measuring gaps, and I'll be in this video here, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.